main goal with the beat sheet is to make sure you're going in with a plan. And I think that that's what the that's what, you know, the vast majority of people who don't do well at this. Thank you. But I'm just reading your thing. Yeah. Thank you very much. Just reading your thing, Tammy. I appreciate that. Um, uh, um, is you know, you'll get in the script and you'll start going and you say, hey, something needs to change, because as I, you know, get in the script and write dialogue and description, that doesn't quite work like I thought it would, or I thought of a better idea. Okay, so that's 1000% totally fine. You know, definitely I recommend going back to the beat sheet and making the change and just kind of looking at it from a bird's eye view to see how it all fits, how the puzzle pieces all fit together. And if it's square, it's like it's like when you're building a house, the beat sheet is the blueprint. You know, generally speaking, if you're building a house, you're like, hey, I need to put a wall here, and you're already building it, a wall you hadn't planned for, you probably want to go back to the blueprint and take a look at that and draw in the wall and just look at, you know, all the load bearing structures around it and the floor, and make sure it can support that before you go in and just, you know, build the wall. You want to make sure that you know, you plan for it, and then you see that it's going to work on paper. Then you devote the time to actually putting that wall. That's actually a pretty good analogy. So so that's why I recommend, as you guys make changes, definitely, you know, at some point, like shortly after you make the change, if there's a change to your beat sheet, you definitely want to make that change, because because you know, it'll just help you keep track of things, what you did, a lot easier. So I have to say, and not everybody's here yet, 3, 4, 5, 6. I mean, I'm the proudest I've ever been of any class of you guys. I know it's hard work. I know it's not easy. I'm sure many of you would never have thought that a class could be this difficult. And it's just writing. But of course, as you know, hopefully any difficulty that you're experiencing isn't from, you know, the quizzes per se, or knowing what a midpoint beat is. The difficulty that you're experiencing now and will experience, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, you will experience going on and out, is not coming up with the right answer, but knowing there isn't a right answer to your story, and neither me nor anybody else in the world can tell you what story you should write. All the teacher does is tell you how to write it in a way that, you know, other people can kind of understand your ideas and understand whatever's in your head. That's what the 15 beat system is all about. Is whatever your ideas are, that's fine, but here's a way to structure it so the rest of us, you know, who outside of yourself can kind of understand what's going on. But you'll see the difficult part is, you know, choosing a correct way, like telling the story in a way that is acceptable, but then straining for, okay, this is missing something. I know it could be better. Or usually, hopefully, it's something like, this is missing something, question mark, because hopefully with the craft you're learning and the beats you're learning, and especially what you learned in the immutable physics of screenwriting, hopefully you have you know, learned to kind of target some of the problem areas. You kind of know some of the things that may happen, that and ways to fix them, but being able to squeeze maybe a little bit more expression out of your characters, a little more character development out of your characters. And once again, that's not a multiple choice test kind of thing. It's you know, it's like therapy. You know, these advances have to be yours, and it's really hard work, but I think when you come out at the end of it, it's like, I don't have any kids, but those of you who do have kids know, you have, it's almost like this script is a new life, is a new thing, creature that was not in the world, 15, 16 weeks ago. Something that only existed maybe in your head is now right in front of you, and you can see it. You can print it out, and other people can read it, and they can make it into a movie. And to me, that's pretty amazing. Something that was just in your imagination is now manifest in a physical form, and it's the truest form of creation. Um, because a lot of other things we learn, like lighting and cinematography and editing, if you really, depending upon your situation, that could be reduced to, okay, I'm just following instructions. I'm not doing a whole lot of original creation here. I'm vibing off of the previous artist that handed me this footage. You know, I'm working with what they gave me. Now you're doing a lot of creation, but not from whole cloth. You're not creating from basically nothing, which is what you guys are doing, and I know that's incredibly hard. And to know, my one of my models is story is king. That means that, oh, queen, and that means that, like I said to you a number of times, everybody else involved with the production is just standing around waiting for a script to appear. Nobody does anything, from the studio to the producers to the director to the actor. Nobody does anything until that script appears. You know, most people, not all, but most people will treat the script with a large degree of respect, and it's sacrosanct. Now that doesn't mean that the director is not going to interpret your script, right? That doesn't mean the actors are not going to interpret the words of dialogue that your character in the body language, the business and the blocking. Okay, that doesn't mean that that's not going to happen, but know that you know these artists that are working with you, that are collaborating with you, whether you're on the set or not. You could just be the screenwriter. You wrote the script, you sold the script, and that's it. You don't have any more involvement. But know that even if that's the case, they're still collaborating with you. They're collaborating with your work, and know that collaboration has to do with them understanding, them getting your vision, and um, expanding upon that vision. Or I don't want to say expanding, because that sounds like there's like a lot of material that's new and in a different direction that you didn't intend when you wrote it. Now sometimes that does happen, sometimes that has to happen, but really what it's more like is, um, they're interpreting your work with their own instrument. Okay, when I say interpreting your work, work is screenwriting, their own instrument. If they're a um, cinematographer, they're interpreting your work with their instrument of the camera and the lens and light. If you're an actor, they're interpreting your screenplay, interpreting your work in terms of dialogue and behavior. Okay, and these are different instruments, different means that they have of interpreting your work. And if your vision is clear in your script, then what they do may not have been exactly what you imagined, but in best case scenario, you look at it and say, huh, okay, I see how they've taken my vision, and they've expanded on it. They're giving me more of what I wanted, even though I wasn't fully aware of how much it could be expanded, and how much it could be how much it could be further substantiated. It's kind of hard to say. It's kind of hard to, I guess, put in words, but but it's all very interconnected, and that's one of the exciting things about film is, no matter what you do, you're depending upon other collaborators to expand the work beyond just you, and it becomes something greater than just something you made. It becomes something we made, and the film is greater than any one person's contribution, and that's one of the things I really like about filmmaking. So hopefully you all had a wonderful weekend. And I said this to Aunt Andrew and Miss Willingham before anybody got here, but I'll say it again because a few other people have checked in. I have graded everyone's 15 beat sheet with the exception of 3 people, Andrew, Miss Willingham, and Charles Smith. I'm gonna finish those up tomorrow, but I'm going to, because I want everybody to have at least 3 week or 2 weeks to work on that first draft. I'm pushing the deadline of the first draft to March the 14th. That's a Tuesday. Okay, Tuesday, March the 14th, 11:59 p.m. So I'm pushing it back to that. So you have a couple more days. It was originally the 12th. I'm pushing it back to Tuesday, March 14th. Now the midterm exam is still March the 12th, Sunday, March the 12th, 11:59 p.m. That midterm exam is up now. It was up since last week. So, you don't have to wait until the last minute to do that. You can, I just assume get it out of the way so you can focus all of your time. I mean, study and do your best, of course. I'm not saying just blow past it, but do your best on that, and then really, really focus on your first draft, because that's the whole point of being in the class. The whole point is the first draft, and then you revise it, and then revise it, and then revise it. All right. What I'm gonna start off today doing is I'm going to start off with, we had a quiz, right? So let's start off by going over the quiz on chapter 6, the immutable laws of screenplay physics. Only half of you guys took the extra credit quiz on Wonder Woman 1984, which, if you were to say, hey, watching that film was just too punishing, it was too torturous, I couldn't get through that, I can understand that. I can understand. All right. So 20 questions. Number 1, what did the author of the text list as the inspiration for writing Save the Cat? Blake Snyder said that he wanted to write Save the Cat because he had a bunch of snappy rules for screenwriting, and he wanted to get credit for coining them. And I think that was kind of tongue-in-cheek, because one thing I can tell you, even though I don't think he was ever like a teacher like in a classroom like what I do, but anybody who gets good at anything to the point where you're telling people how to do what you do, you're a teacher. Whether it's formally or informally, you're a teacher. And a lot of teachers are always, many times we're about, okay, wow, as I write this book, some consistent rules about screenwriting, consistent things that I'm seeing over and over again in screenplays all the time seem to come to my attention. I'm going to write these down. It's almost like writing down the 10 commandments for posterity, so that we can crack this code of what makes a good screenplay. Let me close my door. The dog is going nuts. Hold on. All right. Okay. So next one, what is the value of learning the rules of the craft of screenwriting? The value of learning the rules of the craft of screenwriting is that they give you the credibility and the authority to override those rules once you learn and want to make an informed departure from them. This is part of it. This is what the book says, and this is definitely true, but only part of it. A lot of times, especially in art and definitely in writing, we have this kind of mushy, willy-nilly, everything is okay as long as it's real creativity, and there's no right and there's no wrong, and there's no right and wrong as in 2 + 2 = 3 is wrong. It's not like that, but definitely you could say that as far as like, say for example, you have a film, it's supposed to be a traditional film, but there's no conflict because there's no antagonist or villain, whether it's a person or a force of nature. You have none of that. And people say, well, that's okay, right? Yeah, sure, you can do that. Nobody's going to throw you in jail if you write a screenplay like that. But as far as the way screenplays have been traditionally crafted over the past 100+ years, the certain, I don't even like calling them rules or laws, certain things that just seem to work have surfaced. And the reason why it's kind of hard to argue against it is because of the fact that for the last 100 plus years, people have seen these conventions, seen these rules, if you want to call them, play out in film over and over and over and over. And the average person who has no film or writing experience, you know, three act structure, for example, is ingrained in them, and they don't know it, you know. And so as a result, it's like everyone in the most people in the world, definitely in the Western world, they have a certain language that they speak and they understand without knowing. And in order to communicate better with them, in order to communicate optimally with them, you know, you need to learn the rules so that they understand what your idea is. If you have a great idea, but if you're horrible at communicating it, then, well, you almost might as well not have that idea, because only at least half of it is having the idea. The other 50% is communicating it so that people can understand and see your vision and get where you're coming from. So that's the part that the book doesn't really say. But the part that the book does say is that a lot of times you get hotshot mad. Oh, I don't need the rules. I've been doing this since I was 3 years old on my grandpappy's knee. And they don't know the rules. Well, and they immediately start trying to break the rules, right? Well, you can't really say they're breaking the rules because they don't know them. But you can always tell when a person in any art form, not just screenwriting, not just film, you can always tell when a person is making a choice that's inconsistent with the medium that they're working in. They're not following the rules, in other words, because they know the rule and they're subverting our expectations, meaning that, you know, hey, I know the rule. I'm going to play on the fact that you think I'm going to follow the rule, but I'm going to make a modification that's going to defy your expectations. You can always tell when a person does that, as opposed to the person doesn't know the rule, hasn't studied any of this. They're just making up stuff, or worse than that, usually what they're doing is they're just simply imitating another movie they've seen. You know, that's another thing you'll often get from people. They'll say, well, I've seen a trillion movies, and things like that. And so I kind of know how it works. It's like, yeah, that doesn't quite work either, because it's like saying I've had a trillion steaks at steakhouses. So because I've tasted a lot of good steaks, then I automatically know how to make a good steak. And, you know, I'm pretty sure that, you know, any chef would tell you that, you know, yeah, it ain't, I'm no chef, by the way, but it ain't that easy. You know, it's, you know, we make it look easy, but it by no means is it easy. So you can always tell when a person is not following the rules because they don't know the rules, versus a person who knows the rules, understands the rules, understands how the rules work, and then use that understanding to make a different choice, to break the rules, bend or break the rules. Okay, it's as clear as day. Um, so that's what that's all about. Next one. What is the most controversial aspect about Blake Snyder's technique, according to most screenwriters who review his book? First of all, I know there are a lot of screenwriters who don't particularly care for Blake Snyder. You know, a lot of them feel that it is very commercial, and I mean, any kind of a screenplay system, anything that's been laid down as far as, okay, this idea works and this idea and this structure works, you know, you can call that formula. And a lot of people don't like formulas, but that's really like saying they don't like rules. um but some people think that some people resent Blake Snyder's suggestion that every screenplay should have a save the cat moment. And you guys know that a save the cat moment is something that the hero does early in the film, or the protagonist does early in the film, that'll make you want to root for them. Something like saving a cat from a tree. It doesn't have to be that literal, right? Where they save a cat from a tree or they physically do something. It could be a quality about the protagonist that you admire. They could be really kind to children or old people. They can be really good at their job. They're an ace electrician, right? Josiah. They could be a charismatic and funny character. Okay. These are things that are kind of like save the cat moments or save the cat elements, but it's not them literally doing something. It's really more about the characterization of the protagonist in this case. Um, in order to really understand what Blake Snyder, what he does and why, you have to understand the context for all of this. Blake Snyder, and he says it in his book, look, this is a system that was structured around um, Hollywood, uh, uh, like mainstream Hollywood film. Okay. So if you're doing an independent foreign film, if you're doing art film, if you're doing, something like that, you know, most of these rules will still apply, but there are some tweaks in there. Okay. But it's for a particular context. The biggest context, the largest context in the industry is, going out to the multiplex, the AMC, to watch a movie like, Transformers or Avatar or Star Wars, and what that's what Blake Snyder is his book is targeted towards, writing scripts like that in structure, or Pretty Woman, or it doesn't have to be from a particular genre. It's, just that mainstream Hollywood film. And even if you're like, well, I don't really like mainstream Hollywood film, what you have to understand is that all the offshoots that are not mainstream Hollywood film were departures from mainstream Hollywood film. So in order to even understand that departure first, you've got to understand the main entity that they were departing from in the first place. Okay. So to understand, hey, I'm not going to stay on 285. I'm going to go off road, and I'm going to go off to the west and do this and do that and do the other. In order to really do that in an informed way, you have to understand how 285 runs in the first place. So understand the standard. And then if you're like, hey, I understand the standard, I understand how the rules work, but I want to take a departure from that. That is, not only is that okay, but that in a lot of cases, it's definitely admirable. People like Quentin Tarantino, who definitely started his career off as departing from the norm. Now he is the norm. So that's what's so funny about it, is the fact that you can be as maverick as you want, and but if you get what you want, which is, you're successful as an artist, people are going to co-opt you or incorporate you in the way you write and tell stories. And for example, the Blake Snyder system is going to get just a little bit bigger to include, the way you write scripts. One thing I can tell you is that, other than the save the cat moment, I was trying to think of um, a film uh, like Joker, okay, with the Joaquin Phoenix, like Joker, or Downfall. That's the one about Hitler and his last days in his bunker. You don't root for Joker per se. You don't root for Hitler, definitely not in Downfall. However, what accounts for the fact that you want to follow the story, seeing things through their eyes, okay? And the fate of the protagonist, it means something to you. Because even if you're watching Downfall, yeah, the historical Hitler, yeah, you glad he lost and he died and he's dead. But this character of Hitler, it's like, well, I want to see the world through this character's eyes and understand, why he is like he is, or actually, to be honest with you, I think that even in Downfall and Joker, you don't have a save the cat moment, but you have a certain degree of sympathy that you have with the protagonist. So, for example, with Joker, you know, he's not a good guy at all, but you see he takes care of his mother. That could be kind of considered a save the cat moment. He takes care of his mentally ill mother. He's a good mama's boy. I don't say that with any sarcasm at all, Miss Willingham. And and so um uh those are things that it's who he is, his character, the fact that he's suffering, that's something that really makes you sympathetic to him. Even I can say, even with downfall, even with Hitler, okay, the last days are coming, and the last days of World War II are coming, and what eventually is going to have to happen at the end of this film. He's going to die at the end of the film, but at the same time, you see a different characterization that you don't normally see. You see a vulnerable Hitler. You see a Hitler that's scared. You see a Hitler that's constantly shaking because he has Parkinson's disease. So you're not rooting for him to accomplish his goal per se, but he's intriguing enough of a character for you to want to follow him, to see, okay, what's going to happen next. Okay. And that's when you make a film like that, it's a little more nuanced. A couple of you may have films that impinge on that, where the good guy is not like or the protagonist is not like a Captain America good guy. Anesh may have a script like that. If Miss Willingham, I haven't read the new beat sheet or the change that she's made since the previous assignment yet, but hers could go in that direction. It depends on what you wanted to do. Let's see who else. Kinda Jonai, Jonai's character, protagonist, the cowboy who gambled away the family's fortune. You know, um, it's kind of like that, where, okay, this person isn't like a good person, good guy. I want to be like this person, but sometimes you have a certain degree of sympathy for, or also um, Victor's as well. Okay, where it's not a he's not a good guy. As a matter of fact, Victor's character, we saw a little bit about his character last week, is kind of naive, kind of foolish. Now at the end of the film, at the end of the story, everything turns out all right, but that's not the reason we're watching the film. We're not interested in the character because we know he's foolish at the beginning, but we know he'll make a turnaround in the end, and he won't be naive and foolish anymore. That doesn't necessarily have to happen. Okay, not at all. I mean, the the character. I think I told you guys how it ended. Victor's is the one with gingerbread, the gingerbread baking contest, and the guy can feed his family with it or build a house. So he spends the money for a gingerbread bread house and enters the contest, and um, and he doesn't win first place. I like the fact that he's like, okay, I'm not going to give it to you. I'm not going to give you the grand prize and have you ride off into the sunset. That's just unrealistic and kind of idealistic. So I admire that. But he got third prize. He got some money, and he did have a certain degree of success, and he also got wisdom from it as well. But it didn't have to turn out like that. Not at all. Okay. Um, and Joker is a really good example of that, where ultimately, um, I guess you could say the protagonist Joker, he achieves his goal, even though at the beginning he didn't know what it was. He didn't know his goal was to be free of his mother, not be burdened with his mother anymore, and to be a arch enemy, a bad guy, bad villain, with throngs of devoted Joker fans who are doing destructive things. He didn't know that's what he wanted at the beginning, but that's eventually who he became. And in a way, it is kind of what he wanted at the beginning, because he wanted popularity and fame and people to admire him, but he wanted to do it as a stand-up comic, not as a supervillain, right? At the end of the film, spoiler alert, but you've had, I guess, 4 years. he does end up being admired and followed by a bunch of people, but for the wrong reasons. So he got to a degree, he got what he wanted, just not in the way he wanted, and not in a way any of us would say, "Hey, I approve of this. This is a happy ending to the story." And that's not how that worked. And I think that it's important that a significant number of stories are like that, because that's life. Sometimes the good guy doesn't win. Sometimes the sick person isn't healed from the disease, right, Ade? Sometimes the poor sick person doesn't hit the lottery and suddenly can afford the heart transplant, and is wealthy and lives happily ever after. That's generally not how things work in life. And um, art is not supposed to just make you feel good, or kind of give you these Pollyanna kind of stories. It's supposed to be a metaphor for life. It's supposed to reflect life, teach you things about life, you know. And so that's there's a place for films like Joker and Downfall and stuff like that. All right, next moment. What does it say? The cat moment. I already said that. It's when the protagonist does something likable when we meet him, so we'll want to see him win. What does the immutable laws of screenwriting say you should do to make your protagonist likable when they are an anti-hero or a person that is doing something despicable in the movie? To make your protagonist likable when they're an anti-hero or a person who's doing something despicable in a movie, you should make your antagonist worse. Okay, so that means that if Joker is the protagonist, and in the movie Joker, there are a lot of people who are unknowingly kind of blocking Joker from achieving his goal, right? So, for example, if you take the Robert De Niro character, who is the talk show host in that film, yeah, Joker, he's not a good guy. He shot some guys on the subway and this, that, and the other. However, the people that oppose him, in many ways, although they're not criminals, technically speaking, their character is even worse than his is. It's like, well, at least what Joker does, he has an excuse. He's mentally ill. The Robert De Niro character, who's a talk show host who brings the Joker on and then humiliates him on the air, he doesn't have an excuse. He's just being cruel. So in a way, in a certain moralistic kind of way, ethical way, the Robert De Niro character, and I can't remember his character's name. He's worse than the Joker, right? At least in that film. So if your film is your protagonist is the Punisher and he kills a lot of people, then the bad guy who the Punisher has to track down, or better nix that. Better example. Dexter. That's a great example. If you guys remember the Showtime show Dexter, he's a serial murderer, but he kind of he's able to restrict him kidnapping and murdering people to other murderers or rapists or people who sort of deserve it or have it coming. So he's a mass murderer, but he will murder just like child molesters or something like that. And most people will say, "Oh, a child molester is worse than a murderer." Especially if the murderer is killing the child molester and getting them off the street. You know what I mean? So that's an example of making your antagonist even worse than the anti-hero protagonist. By the way, just in case you don't know, anti-hero is a protagonist, but they're not like the Captain America hero type. Okay, they're the type of person who has all characters, all of your protagonists, every single one of them. And this is one of the things I said in your notes to a lot of people. Your characters need flaws, because if they have no flaw, your protagonists rather need flaws, because if they have no flaws, there's nowhere for them to grow, right? But with the anti-hero, they're a person like, say, Wolverine, right? In the X-Men movies or the Wolverine movies or Deadpool. They don't do the happy doing it for the the red, white, and blue, and the American way, and freedom and justice for all. That's not why they do things. Okay. But you root for them nonetheless because of the fact that the anti-hero, a lot of times, they find themselves like an everyman, meaning that they kind of have a lot in common with regular people, right? Common with the audience. Okay. I would go into a 1991 movie called Falling Down, starring Michael Douglas, but I know many of you probably haven't seen that one. Um, it's a good film. It's definitely worth seeing. But that's a trend you see now with anti-heroes. Because they're like, the Captain America thing, the Superman thing is just so boring because of the fact that, they're characters that if they have flaws, they're not very major. Captain America. I'm gonna not Captain America. Well, yes, we use Captain America. Captain America being a man out of time in the 2000s when he was born in the 1940s, and him not being able to connect with people in the current current time because of just the distance in time, the generational distance, the difference in time, and not just that, but how much time he's lost because he was frozen on ice for decades before they dug him up and introduced him to the real world. The 2000s and 2010s. You know, but that being kind of out of touch with the current generational population, that's not really a character flaw, you know. Um, um, yeah, okay. So, who taught Blake Snyder, the Pope in the pool trick? Mike Cheetah taught Blake Snyder the Pope in the pool trick, and I think I mentioned this to you um, last time, where the Pope in the pool trick is if you have exposition, which is you have a character who has to explain a whole bunch of stuff about the story in order for the reader to understand what's going on. By the way, I can almost taste it. Many of you may be in a situation where there's boring scenes where your characters are spouting dialogue that's explaining things about the story. That's called exposition, like as an exposition, and it is the bane of every writer. Sometimes you have to do it, but you've got to think of creative ways of doing it so that the audience is not being spoon-fed information, and it doesn't seem like you're just long explanations. That's boring, right? The Pope in the pool trick says if you have exposition where somebody has to say something, then have the person who's doing the talking. When I say somebody has to say something, somebody has to explain something, facts of the world of your story so the audience gets it. Have it so that that character is doing something interesting or something interesting is going on at the same time. Like if you saw a Pope in a Speedo floating with water wings in the Vatican's pool as he's delivering some exposition about the story. Now, it's not really a distraction, but it's something that's just visually interesting enough to the point where we'll tolerate this exposition. Another thing that I want to tell you guys to do is don't dummy down your work for the audience. Okay. Most people will say, and I agree fully, don't start your story from the beginning. Okay. It's almost like the most interesting stories are the ones that are started from the middle, where you're asking, okay, what happened just before, when we were here. Okay. An example, there are lots of examples. Logan is a good example if you've seen that one, where you see it's in the future. You see Professor X is sick. They're kind of living in this old ramshackle drive-in movie theater, and he's taking care of Professor X, Professor Xavier, and they're kind of outlaws. And you don't know any of what caused this. You just jump into the story from there, right? And it's through context that you get, okay, the backstory, what happened. No one's going to say, No one really says in that film, hey, in the early 21st century, mutants were hunted down by human beings and most of them were killed. So we have to live here on the run in this drive-in theater and stay off the radar so we can live a long life. And Professor X is sick because, and then fill in the blank as to why he's like a mental dementia kind of thing going on that's affecting his powers. Don't do that because you're talking down to your audience. That is a huge, huge, huge sign that you are an amateur as a writer. If you're explaining stuff to the audience, and if this is hard to do, but this is where you need to really spend a lot of time developing your skills. Is number one, showing through action in general sections of your screenplay what's going on as opposed to telling, okay, through dialogue, okay, because people would always rather see it visually than hear it, okay. If you do say it, you generally don't have to show it, but if you do show it, you absolutely should not say it. So if you see two hijackers jump on a bus and pull out guns, you would not have the passenger on the bus say, hey, two hijackers have jumped on the bus and pulled out guns. I would expect that from a third grader or a first grader. All right. So if you show it, don't say it. Okay. And a lot of it is all about context. It's all about context, meaning that you can kind of tell what's going on based on all the characters, the events, the actions that are going on. You can tell what's going on. No one has to explain it to you. So I understand sometimes some exposition may be necessary, especially with complex films. Like, once again, going back to, it's not a complicated film, but it's in a world that's not as standard that everybody lives in. That's with Anesh's film. Okay. But try to tell, gosh, I almost don't want to say this because I'm afraid people are going to go overboard with it, but I'd rather you lean in this direction more. Try to tell your audience as little as possible as far as what is explicitly going on, and have your characters just react to the things that are happening. Okay, so don't go too far with that, but we'll see what you guys come up with. But as I use as little exposition or explanation as possible, and just have stuff happen. Okay, and that's a much more cinematic, a much more creative way of doing things. Yes, the audience has to work to figure out, okay, what happened before the film started. Who is this guy to this other guy? As long as you use context properly, they'll be able to figure it out. Well, they don't want to figure it out. They just want me to tell them. No, they don't. Whether they admit it or not, your audience wants to work. They want to follow the clues that you leave for them in order to understand the world of your story. If you are explicitly explaining the world of your story, then you're not going in the right direction. Okay. Like I said, I know some exposition is necessary, but you should always, it's almost like how low can you go? What's that game where they lower the limbo? It's like limbo. How low can you go? How low can you go? Right? How bare minimum, how minimalist can your explanations of what's going on, your exposition be, and your audience still understand what's going on? I'd rather see a person who's like, okay, yeah, there's something I kind of missed there. And there's some actions that go on and I'm not exactly sure what's going on. So you might need to have a couple of lines of dialogue out of your characters that give me some kind of context. They don't have to explain it necessarily what's going on, but give me some kind of context. Okay. Last thing before I move to the next question is that, and by the way, all this advice is mostly pointed at what you should be doing as you get into script and start working on your script. And we're going to talk a lot about dialogue later on. Dialogue is what your characters say. Characters don't say what's on their minds. Characters generally say everything but what's on their minds. Okay, and what I mean by that is this. You come in to your your significant others, you come in from work, significant other standing there, and the significant other is say create is cooking dinner, and they're slamming the pots down on the on the on the stove, and they're really they don't say anything to you, and they're very aggressive, and you just kind of give your wife a peck on the cheek, and she doesn't respond, and she's very very cold towards you. She's not saying anything. She's cold towards you, and the uh and then the husband says, "Hey, so what's going on?" And the wife turns around, pulls a number off the top of the refrigerator, and throws it in his face, or throws it down in front of him, and it's another woman's phone number. Okay. Now, that scene could have been written and handled in an entirely different way. He could have come in and the wife said, "I am angry with you, Joe. I am mad because I found another woman's phone number in your pocket, and now I am concerned about our relationship." Dude, that's what's on her mind, explicitly stated. People never talk like that. Next time you get into any kind of real conversation with the person, or not even a conversation, interaction with the person, notice how you don't, a lot of times you don't speak in full sentences. Um, um, Sometimes you talk around the subject, but you know from context what you're talking about. Okay. That's and it's a tap. There's a skill. There's a particular skill of writing dialogue that you need to really start to study. If you're interested in, well, okay, what filmmakers write dialogue really well, and I can look at what they do and try to, not copy what they do per se, but kind of learn from them. Okay. Uh, I guess currently the one that is biggest is that is most known for his dialogue right now is Quentin Tarantino. Okay. Quentin Tarantino does a great job of uh, writing for writing dialogue. Okay. Some people say it's sometimes a bit excessive. He'll have two characters who are going to do a hit, and they're talking about. Somebody said this earlier in class. I can't remember who did. They were talking about what did they call the Big Mac or the Quarter Pounder in Amsterdam, right? And they're on the way to this hit, and it's like this. It's not a really long conversation, but they're not talking about what they're about to go do, which is kill some people. Okay. Now, you may say, well, that's just a bunch of empty talk and it has nothing to do with anything with the story. But you see later on, it comes into play when they go in and kill when they kill the guys in the house, the scene where Brad, who is the guy who is like the ringleader, he's able to figure out, kind of figure out what some of the things that John Travolta's character Vinny and Julian, Samuel Jackson's character, what they were talking about in the car about the Big Mac versus the Whopper and what they call them in other countries and whatnot. He's able to kind of there's a payoff, or there's a reference to that later on in the scene, and so as a result, it bears a significance a little later on. But Tarantino is one good example. You can really choose any Tarantino film. Another great one is David Mamet. By the way, just in case you don't know any Tarantino films, Pulp Fiction, like I said, Reservoir Dogs, what's the World War II one? Inglourious Bastards, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Kill Bill Volumes 1 and 2. And so it kind of gives you a lead. Another one that's great for dialogue is David Mamet. David Mamet, and he started off as a playwright, and then later on he became a screenwriter. And there are, as far as some films that David Mamet has made that would be it would be useful for you to look at if you're interested in learning how to write better dialogue. There's a film called Heist from 2001. There's a film called let's see, I'm looking. Perspective about last night. Let me see. Okay, The Untouchables, 1987. With it's a gangster film about prohibition in its 1930s, and it's about prohibition, which is when alcohol was illegal in the early 20th century, and gangsters and stuff. The Untouchables is a good one. Let's see what else. Glengarry Glen Ross is another good one from 92. Hoffa, about Jimmy Hoffa, the Teamster, is another one in 92. Let's see, Spanish Prisoner in 97. Wag the Dog is a really good one. It's really funny in 97. Hannibal, Hannibal, the original, well, the one in 2001, not the first one, Silence of the Lambs, but Hannibal. He wrote the screenplay for that in 2001. That's something you may be familiar with. So you should study people like it. Let me find one more. One more writer that's known for dialogue. Martin Scorsese, he's pretty good with it. Scorsese, of course, Casino. Gosh, I'm sorry, I'm trying to something else. Casino, not Last Temptation of Christ, because that's something totally different. I wouldn't study that one. Goodfellas, Mean Streets, with this most recent one he did on Netflix. What was that? The Irishman. With the Departed is another one. So if you look at the dialogue in those, you'll see. Now, not all of those are, well, none of those were written by Scorsese, but it's like the type of projects that the type of screenwriters Scorsese works with, they're good screenwriters. So any Scorsese film, I'll give you one more. I'm gonna try to find one that you probably. Andrew Kevin Walker, his film Seven. That's the one. That's the one with Morgan Freeman and Brad Pitt about the killer who's on the loose and is killing people according to the 7 deadly sins. Andrew Kevin Walker wrote that script. It was directed by David Fincher, but Andrew Kevin Walker wrote the script, and he really writes great dialogue. By the way, as far as like Goodfellas and Casino, Nicholas Pileggi, I believe it is, wrote the script for that for Martin Scorsese, and they collaborate really closely together. So you can almost say they're one and the same. All right. So those are just some ones that you should look at. Okay. Some because a lot of times people tend to have a talent for writing dialogue. There's some people who have a talent for writing dialogue, and they can write their ticket to Hollywood, because if you write great dialogue, then everybody loves you. Which one of the following is an example of double mumbo jumbo? What is that? An example of double mumbo jumbo is when the hero is whisked away to a parallel universe and then he is turned into a zombie. Okay. Double mumbo jumbo. I think there was like 1 or 2 scripts I was concerned about this being a concern, and that's this. Your audience can only deal with one extraordinary condition per film. Okay. So if your film is about your main character gains superpowers, and also the whole world is overtaken by the zombie apocalypse, that's too much. That's too much. Okay, it needs to be one or the other, one extraordinary condition at a time. Okay, because after a certain point in time, it's like it makes the premise less believable. Okay, people use it all the time. You can see from this next one. Unfortunately, people use double mumbo jumbo all the time, but that's a lot of the reason as to why it makes a premise less believable. As an example of double mumbo jumbo in films that you may have seen, what's the one with Mila Jovovich? It's based on a based on a based on a video game. Resident Evil. Resident Evil is an example of double mumbo jumbo, where there's just a little too many extraordinary conditions going on for it to be believable and for you to really invest in one or the other. What's laying too much pipe, according to Blake Snyder? Laying too much pipe is writing too much setup before you get to the hook or the plot point of the film. This is a common mistake for young writers, the writers who are just starting off. They feel like I've got to set up the whole world explicitly with exposition and set up, what Wall Street was doing for the last 2 years before the beginning of the story, even though the story has nothing to do with Wall Street. And, I've got to go into the traffic patterns in downtown Los Angeles, nothing to do with the film once again. And it's too much setup, and you're going to bore and lose your audience before you get to the hook or the plot point. That's where I have a character is like whatever their reality is as normal, the thesis world, it's a normal reality for your character, and then something changes. Something happens. That phone call that comes in and says, your grandfather is dead. He has $1 billion, then show up to see who inherits show up to see who is going to get the inheritance. Okay. That's the plot point, because without that, in most cases, you wouldn't have a movie, right? And your character who just walking around is going to continue to walk around, and they're never going to be a billionaire. So be careful about laying too much pipe, too much setup, right? Many times that's something that we eliminate in the early drafts. But I tell you, start in the middle of things. It's way more interesting to, instead of showing a character casing out a joint, bank, and preparing to rob the bank, and they go in and rob the bank, and they run away from the bank with the money, and the police are chasing them. Instead of doing all of that, a lot of times it's more interesting to just start the film with the character running down an alley with money that's flying everywhere, and blue sirens are chasing them, and the police is chasing them. Because you're thinking as, what the heck? What happened? Who is this guy? Why is he running? Where did that money come from? Did he rob a bank? Will the police catch him? Okay. And essentially, you have all the information that you need to kind of understand the world of the story at that point. You don't have to show the whole setup in chronological order. They get it. You robbed the bank. All right. How many pages do you need to limit your setup beats to in order to not bore your audience or try their patience? It says 25 pages, but this is if you're writing a 110 page script. Of course, you guys are writing a much shorter script. So, roughly between 25 and 30% of your script should be set up. That's really all of Act 1. So if you're writing a 15 page script rather, then that would be about 3 pages. Excuse me, about 3 pages. Okay, so your setup, really all of Act 1 is 3 pages. And it's something I want to come back to. Please remind me, somebody, to talk about what setup is, because some people got it wrong, what the theme is, because some people got it wrong. Okay, and it's really important. I wrote it in their notes, but I want to kind of say it for everybody to hear, just in case anybody else needs to hear that. What does Blake Snyder define as the black vet too much marzipan problem? According to Snyder, the black vet too much marzipan problem is where a writer tries to cram too many concepts into a film. Okay, that is, once again, a common mistake of a young writer. They have so many great ideas that they want to kind of put it all in the same film. Okay, uh, a little kid says the word Shazam. This is not a real example. I'm just kind of making stuff up. Says the word Shazam and turns into a superhero. He now has to deal with the superhero powers, but also there are space monsters coming in. He has to defend the city. Maybe that's okay. But also at the same time, dinosaurs are in the sewers. Has nothing to do with the aliens. Dinosaurs are in the sewers. And he has to go down and fix that. But also at the same time, the world is teetering on the edge of World War III. It's too much, okay? Too much marzipan. A little dabble do ya, as they used to say in the old days on a popular commercial. A little dabble do ya. So, look, I have one main conflict. Any conflicts beyond that main conflict, and it should only be a couple at most, they stem from that main conflict, okay? But too much of a good thing can be a bad thing. Okay, you try to cram too many concepts into a story. The good news is that if you have too many good concepts, hey, get rid of most of them and use them in their own scripts, which is great because now you've got material for more screenplays. All right. What does Blake Snyder define as to watch out for? Watch out for that glacier problem. According to Blake Snyder, the watch out for that glacier problem is when the danger or conflict in the film is not clear or present, imminent, and it happens so slowly that it can't really be a threat to your protagonist. Okay, some of you may have this concern. Gosh, I don't want to call names because I don't want the person to feel bad or anything like that. Although we're all family here, so we should get used to kind of critiquing each other's work and being supportive of each other. But it's like if either the stake, okay, another way of saying this is stakes are not that high. The stakes are not that high. What that means is that your main character doesn't have a whole lot to lose. Okay. Okay, I'll use a real life example from you guys as real lives at GPTC. Say, for example, you have a student who has gotten involved in some wild, crazy party stuff and is in Alabama and has to get back to class in 45 minutes. I'll say it like this: his class starts in 45 minutes and he's trying to get back to class. Okay. So if you're thinking, wow, the stakes are really high, well, if he doesn't make the class, will he miss the final exam? Will he be kicked out of the class? Will he be kicked out of school? I'm sure there's some consequence if he doesn't show up to class on time. Okay. But the moving glacier problem, and this is a GPTC reality, is if it's clear or you find out over the course of the story, there's no attendance or tardiness policy. So there are no stakes. He can show up or not show up on time, show up 5 minutes late, show up right before the teacher leaves the classroom, locks the door and goes home, and they won't suffer any consequences. Okay, so that means the glacier is either the consequences are not anything significant enough for the audience to really care about, or it's like, okay, if you were to make a film kind of like how people treat climate change now, where, well, hey, this film is going to be really about us fighting and reversing climate change because we want to save the planet. And then you find out, well, when will these changes happen that will destroy the planet? Oh, in about 200 years. You know what I'm saying? It's yes, it's important to save the planet. In real life, it is, by the way. But the reality of it is there's no imminence. There's no imminent danger. Okay. Something that Blake Snyder says that almost every writing instructor says is that time should have something to do with your protagonist meeting their goal. They don't have all day, all year, all their lives to resolve this. They have a certain amount of time. In the Blues Brothers, we saw the clip from that. I know only Miss Willingham and me, and I think Victor may have seen bits and pieces of it, and Miss Graham have seen bits and pieces of it. Only a few of us old folks or old souls are old enough to appreciate this film. But what the story is about two guys, two kind of ne'er-do-wells who were raised in an orphanage and raised by some nuns in an orphanage, and the orphanage is run on hard times, and they don't have much money, and they're going to have to close their doors. So um, Jake and Elwood, the two main characters, John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd, are going to have to get the band back together, and they were in a blues band, and go on a bunch of tour dates, or go on a bunch of performances and make money, and then go up to the offices, like the billing office for the city of Chicago, to pay the debt that that orphanage has, so it can remain open. But they have to do it before 2 p.m. Because if you do it after 2 p.m., the deadline's gone, and you know the orphanage will be closed forever. All right. So that's like a ticking clock. It's like you don't have forever to do this. You have a short amount of time, and usually you don't have enough time to do it. Right. By the way, when I say the floating glacier, that doesn't mean that what's at stake is always like physically life or death. It doesn't have to be life or death. If you look at films like King Richard, The Pursuit of Happiness, why I just named two Will Smith movies, I don't know. But neither one of those were action films where somebody was chasing him down with a gun. Okay. But there was a whole lot at stake. A lot at stake. It could be wealth, a better life, or comfort, a sense of accomplishment or self-esteem. It could be a lot of different things. What's at stake or what you have to lose doesn't have to be like your life in order for it to be very important. It needs to be primal. That means, something that's really basic in most cases. Sometimes if you do it right, it doesn't have to be entirely primal. If you can make it so important to the audience that it seems like it's primal, but like Joker, there's really nothing life or death at stake for the main character, but it's extremely important, what his goal is. All right, next one. What is the covenant of the arc rule? The covenant of the arc rule states the protagonist and his or her supporting characters must change over the course of the film, but the bad guys don't have to change. Okay, very important. We've talked about this before about character arcs. If your protagonist doesn't have flaws, if your protagonist in your opening image, this is another mistake a lot of people made, your opening image had nothing to do with your closing image. Your opening image is a snapshot of your protagonist before they go on the adventure of the story. The final image is the after photo, like after they have learned their lesson, after they have assimilated new skills, the personal growth they've made. Okay, that's the final image, like a before and after picture. There's something that I want to hopefully I have time to talk about, and I don't want to forget to talk about, as far as a lot of people who had problems with the opening image, the theme stated, and the setup. As far as, okay, is the opening image like part of the story, and then I continue the story in the setup, and then I continue the story more in the theme stated beat? It doesn't really work like that. And this is one thing, I think this is probably, to me, the most problematic thing about the Blake Snyder system is there is some room for interpretation, or it needs to be interpreted, but he doesn't say that. He doesn't say that, and I'm going to try to talk about it in a while. But anyway, your supporting characters have to change. But I'm sorry, your protagonist and his or her supporting character, they have to change, but the bad guys don't have to change. A lot of times you have a bad guy that does change. It's interesting. One great example of a film where the bad guy changed was Captain America: Civil War. And just so I can give my voice a rest, I am going to show you. I'm not going to show the whole thing. I'm just going to show you the end. And what was really cool about this was that, hopefully this will show on this. What's really cool about Captain America: Civil War is that the main bad guy is not the Winter Soldier. The main bad guy is Baron Zemo, who you discover at the end has a pretty good case, kind of like Killmonger, um, but he has a change of heart. He changes what he wants to. He changes how he feels, who he is. The bad guy changes at the end of it. Okay, and that's something unusual. And so I was just watching yesterday. Somebody saying more Marvel Cinematic movies need to be like this, where it's more mature and it's more. Another good example is if you saw Black Panther 2: Wakanda Forever. That's another excellent example of an antagonist that changes in the end, right? Let me show you this. Captain America Civil War. It's the last scene where Black Panther is talking to Baron Zemo, and he's sitting on the little ledge. And this is after. This is after. Hold on, let me see. Maybe rather than do that, let me see if I can find the actual clip. This is after. Iron Man and the Winter Soldier and Captain America went at it in that big fight. Let's see if I can find the actual. I want to try to find the actual YouTube. The actual YouTube. It's kind of short. But it'll tell you exactly what I'm trying to say. Illustrate my point, rather. Let me jump through a bunch of hoops. Okay. All right. Let's see if I can find this cool thing that I. Man, this isn't my entire history. To be honest with you, doesn't really seem to be in order either. Here it is, right here. Yeah. All right. Okay, watch this, guys. That's as big as it gets, by the way.
You like this?
I almost killed the wrong man. This is all he wanted. To see them rip each other apart.
And the dust cleared. And the screaming stopped. It took me 2 days. until I found their bodies. And the Avengers, they went home. I knew I couldn't kill them. More powerful men than me have tried. But if I could get them to kill each other.
Vengeance has consumed you. It's consuming them. I'm done letting it consume me.
Tell that to the dead.
The living are not done with you yet.
We need more serious scenes in the MCU like this.
And so I was very short. I'm glad it was as short as it was. So we don't really get as much of the Baron Zemo story, but if you follow the character Baron Zemo, you see that, yeah, he tells you why he did what he did. Yeah, he kind of had a good reason to do what he did. And well, not good reason, but it's understandable. And but by the end of the film, he changes. As a matter of fact, they don't show this in the one I just showed you, but Baron Zemo was like involved in the death of T'Challa's father, T'Chaka, at the beginning, if you remember that. And or actually it was the beginning of Captain America, the Winter Soldier, I think it was. And he apologizes. He apologizes to T'Challa for that, as a matter of fact. And he kind of sees the error of his ways, if they had shown the whole scene. But that's a good example of an antagonist who actually changes. Next question. Why does Snyder advise you to keep the press out of your screenplays? Snyder advises you to keep the press out of your screenplays because when you include news agencies within the story reporting the events of the story, you break the fourth wall and ruin the intimacy of the story, which should be kept between the characters and the audience and away from the fictionalized news agencies in the story. Now, this is something I can also say people find kind of controversial about Blake Snyder's technique. There are countless films that have news agencies as a storytelling device. That means it's a way of conveying information about the story through a news agency. For example, it could be really small, like at the beginning of Black Panther, when we see we understand that, wow, it's amazing. Black Panther, at the beginning of Black Panther, we hear that T'Chaka, Black Panther's father, has died, and that springs us into the action of the first Black Panther movie, and also the beginning of Black Panther 2, where they have actually a few different news broadcasts where they're talking about the death of T'Challa, right? Kind of ironic how those two films back to back use the same plot device to convey the death of a Black Panther, right? And so you see it a lot. Snyder feels that you shouldn't do it. You shouldn't include a TV screen with a CNN person or a news person that's talking about events in the story, because he said it breaks the fourth wall. When it says breaks the fourth wall, what it is? Anybody know what that is? Breaking the fourth wall? Well, actually, that's the next question. That's the next question. Okay. But okay. Hold on. I'm sorry, I didn't see who raised their hand. Could you do that again, please? It went away before I got a chance to. Can anybody, whoever raised their hand, could you do it again, please? Okay, Ade, what's breaking the fourth wall?
Okay, what was it? I think I took a drama class and they were talking about, I guess, the literal sense, and then like I guess like what it actually is. Like the fourth wall would be like acknowledging the actual audience in your story. I believe it comes from when you're in a stage play, you have the, I guess, like the actual background, the sides, and I guess like I think usually they're like, oh, pretend there's like a wall in front of you, so like don't acknowledge them. You're sort of like off in your own world in a way.
No, he's talking about the audience.
Yeah.
He's talking about the characters should not acknowledge that they're being watched by the audience. Okay, So it's like they're not aware. It's like and he mentioned it. Like imagine if you look out on a stage, because this is where it kind of came from. You have a wall behind the stage, the wall on two sides of the stage, and it's an invisible wall on the front of the stage between the audience and the characters. And the idea is when you break that wall, that's like a character responding as if they're aware they're being watched by an audience. A great example of it is Deadpool. Lots of examples. Ferris Bueller does it. Deadpool does it. You've probably seen lots of examples. Josiah, yes.
I was gonna,
Josiah, you
I
want
was, yeah, I was gonna say you have the answer up on the screen. It's on number 18. We can see
Oh,
it
okay,
right there.
cool. All right, all right. Cool. All right. All right. So yeah, it's yeah, yeah, and you know, you She-Hulk, they broke the fourth wall all the time, and that was something that a lot of people really hated about the show, She-Hulk. But what they didn't understand, most of the toxic fanboyism, they didn't understand is that that's how the comic strip was written decades before these toxic fanboys were even born. That's just how the comic book rolled, and they replicated that in the in the series on Disney Plus. Who was Blake Snyder's first writing partner? It was a guy named Robert Howard Perkins. Okay. Which famous director taught Blake Snyder the importance of keeping the press out of the screenplay? Steven Spielberg, not personally, but Steven Spielberg. I hate that I even have to list some of his films because he's like one of the greatest living filmmakers, one of the greatest filmmakers of all time. Some people call him the GOAT of at least Hollywood cinema. The first Transformers movie, okay, I'll give you that. I think he was executive produced. Did he direct that? I think he directed that. War of the Worlds, E.T., 1941, which apparently nobody but my family and I saw. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and you know, a lot something more recent. Well, he just did West Side Story. Let's see, what else did he do that you might have heard of? AI and what's the one with Tom Cruise and Max von Sydow? And Colin Farrell. Colin Farrell? No, Colin. Yeah, Colin Farrell. Minority Report. Those are early 2000s. So that's more recent. But I mean, he's one of the most prolific filmmakers of our lifetimes. Even if you're 20, 19 now, he's one of the most prolific filmmakers. He is probably the single most prolific filmmaker of our lifetime. And so he learned that from Steven Spielberg. And I'm straining to think of examples of films where the news, I'm trying to think of, nothing comes to mind. So that could be a rule that Steven Spielberg follows. Okay, a couple things that I wanted to mention. Oh, first of all, are there any questions on the quiz? Oh, and I almost ran over Steven Spielberg in a golf cart back in 1999. By the way, just for your information, some people know that story where I was interviewing for an internship on the lot on the Universal Studios lot in Los Angeles, and at the time the DreamWorks SKG, which is his production company, they had an office. Their main office was on the Universal Studios, Universal Pictures lot, and I went there to intern to interview for an internship. And as I was leaving after the interview, the intern that was driving me back to the entrance of the building, or the entrance of the studio lot, backed out in the golf cart, and we almost backed over Steven Spielberg. And the next thing you know, I'm working at GPTC. Yes, Josiah Chambers.
I got to see him in front of one of the studios that we were working on, and he passed by real quick because he didn't want nobody seeing him. But it was really cool because it was the color purple, and you know, the last movie he basically did that, and
That's
everybody
another Spielberg film. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I said everybody was just freaking out. You know, you could hear all the whispers.
Sure.
Oh, that's Steven Spielberg. Blah blah blah. I just
Yeah.
saw a man in a hat go by, gray hair, and
Yeah.
we're all like, "Yep."
Yeah.
So it was
Yeah.
cool.
And he's I mean, I won't say he's reclusive. He knows better than to just hang out. He's like Prince. He knows better than to hang out in public. But Prince was kind of reclusive. He's not reclusive from what I understand. But he's pretty friendly and affable and stuff like that. But he knows he's probably the most successful and talented living filmmaker right now. And you don't just walk through the mall with that kind of people recognizing you like that and that kind of fame. You don't just walk through the mall with that. It's one of the burdens, I guess. So some of the issues some people were having is, like I said, the theme stated and the setup and the opening image. How do you work those into a coherent film? Okay, into your script. Well, the idea is this. I would tell people this: write your setup beat first, because the setup beat is, what is the world like before that catalyst that happens, before that plot point, before that event that happens that makes that gives the protagonist the opportunity to make a decision on whether or not to go on this grand journey called the story. Which if he decides, they always do, decide to go on a journey to answer the phone call. Your grandfather's dead and $3 billion, and get to Alaska, and we can read the will. The debate section is when he's, will I do it or won't I do it? Maybe he's trying to talk himself out of doing it or come with good reasons why he should go. Maybe there are other people trying to talk him out of going. Okay, that's the debate section. But the break into two is when he says, "Okay, I'm going. I pack my bags and I head for the bus station or whatever," which would be a nightmare ride on the bus from Georgia to Alaska, right? So we got the setup, okay? Now embedded really in the setup in most cases is the theme, okay? Because during that whole setup I told you about, because the setup and the theme they're not the same beat, but the theme is within the setup. The whole setup I just told you about. Say if my high school buddy, my college roommate, say I'm living with a college roommate, my college roommate sees that I'm going, and he states the theme of the film, which is, I don't know, it's not about the money. It's the most important thing isn't the money. The most important thing is the fact that you cared enough to show up. Okay, say that's the theme. Kind of trite, not very creative, but let's say that's the moral to the story. It's not about the money. It's about the fact that you cared enough to show up. All right, that's the theme. It's stated within the setup while I'm packing my bags to go, right? But notice how it's inside of it. It's nested inside of it. Some people treated the opening image, the theme, and the setup, like I said, as just three parts of the story. The first part is where I answer the phone and hear that the grand uncle is dead. The theme is what's good for the goose is good for the gander. The setup is where I decide to go and pack the bags. So it was almost like each beat was a continuation of the story from the previous beat, which is not what it is. Okay. The theme and the setup are, the setup is nested inside of the theme, and also let me go back and do the opening image. The opening image is not necessarily the first thing that we see, but it's almost like a photograph. If you were to take a photograph of your protagonist at the beginning of the film to show, like, I see the before and after pictures with people who lose weight. If you were to take a picture of them, what would they be like? What image is a metaphor? You can look at it and it's a metaphor. There are no words, but there's a metaphor for who that character is at the beginning of the film. Usually it involves something with their flaws that have to be overcome so that they can successfully, overcoming their flaws is part of their character arc, so they can successfully come up with a solution to achieve their goal. All right. But that's really, once again, that's something that's kind of embedded inside of the setup, is that opening image. So I would say write your setup first and then pull your theme and your opening image out of that. Your theme happens during your setup and your opening image happens during your setup as well. Last thing, something that Blake Snyder doesn't really explicitly state. We've been talking about it, but we have not been really, I've been talking about, we didn't really give it a name. In your Dark Night of the Soul beat, what goes on? Your character's at their worst. Woe is me. I'm not going to win. I'm going to lose. It's all over. How could I ever thought I was going to win this fight, literal or metaphorical? And they're thinking that they've lost the game. They're dead. It's now at the end of that, they have an epiphany that's like, hey, wait a second. I think I have an idea for how I can confront the bad guy and actually win. It's something that's unusual, and it's something that is related to the theme. This epiphany should be related to the theme. Their flaw was what was keeping them from seeing what that solution was. Okay, but that moment where he has that epiphany. Wait a second. I overlooked that. This is something that that may work. Okay, he has to work through his flaw before he can figure it out, right? In the Dark Night of the Soul scene, that's when the flaw is finally cast off. He's finally past his flaw, right? He can now see with clear eyes, and so he sees what he's going to do to solve the problem. But the problem is that he comes up with a solution. Now, the solution that they come up to win the day, that's called a plot point. A plot point in some other systems. Blake Snyder does not explicitly state what a plot point is, or that very important plot point at the end of the All Is Lost beat. He doesn't talk about it, but it's critically important. He talks about it, but he doesn't give it a name, rather. But it's critically important, because if you don't come up with a new way of looking at things and doing things at the end of Act 2, at the end of Lost Night of the Soul, taking you into the break into 3, if you don't come up with a plan, then you have no plausible way of winning the day. And some people did that, where things just kind of happened. Say the protagonist is having a hard time getting into their house. They have to get into their house for some really critical reason, and that's all the way up until the end of Act 3. Okay, they tried everything they can. End of Act 2, tried everything they can. They can't get in, and I look down and under the mat, and wow, there's the key. Your character didn't have to work for that. That didn't require any kind of insight, working through the character's flaws and progressing through that character arc to come up with that plan for how he's going to solve the problem. Okay. And so that's not how that's supposed to work. A few people had that, and I think I mentioned that in the notes. You had a question, Josiah. Yes.
So it was less of a question, but it's more of like a work into what you said. So I changed it up to where you kind of advised to me that I should do this, but to where there's a moment where both my protagonists talk to each other in the Dark Night of the Soul. And you already know who Nathaniel Giovanni is, but Nathaniel talks to Giovanni and like tells him stories about how his sister and him kind of like bonded over TikTok and made TikTok videos together. And that gets Giovanni to see like, oh wow, so this is more than just an app that they get on and have fun. So that was
Shut up. That's your B story. That whole thing. That's your B story, and now you getting it. Now you're getting it. Perfect.
Okay, yeah, I got you.
See that? You see that? Did anybody? I know you guys might not know the whole story, but yeah, he got it. It's like right when I heard it, I was like, bam, he hit the button right when I heard it. Good. Perfect. And that's what's going to make those two generations be able to identify more with one another, because The old electrician knows it's not just about a bunch of young people screwing around on social media doing crazy dances. Although, let's be for real, it really is. He's gonna know being on social media had to do more with this relationship he built with his sister, who has just now died, and that's what really resonates with it. Perfect. I couldn't have done it any better myself. Perfect. Excellent. Anybody else have any other questions? Like I said, you guys have already turned in and you got your grades and stuff, but please don't hesitate to send it to me again if you want me to take another look at it. If you're confident, hey, I got it, then go ahead and jump in the script once you get the okay from me. But and everybody has in one way or another, except for maybe one or two people. You know, I kind of said, okay, here's something you got to do, but for the most part, everybody got what they need. So, hey, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you, Josiah. That shows huge. That was huge.
Thank you.
And the rest of you guys, any other questions? Yes, Ade.
Oh, for the rewrite, like for fixing when we're fixing our mistakes with our
I wouldn't call them mistakes. Let's just call them making things better, more clear, whatever. You know.
Oh, sure.
Go ahead.
But while we're doing like rewriting, do you still want us to keep it around a sentence or two, or can we elaborate further on it?
You mean on your beat sheet?
Yeah. Or
don't elaborate. Usually, when you elaborate, you're digging yourself in a hole. Okay. Think of it like this. I don't know how you guys do, because you young people, you're talking to a really a good-looking lady who's way out of your league. Okay. You happen to say a couple of things that make her smile or laugh. Okay. Once you get it, you need to say as little as possible after that, because if you oversell yourself, the only place you're going is down. That laugh is going to turn into a frown. So you're going to turn and walk off before you get the phone number, right? So think of it like that. You need to put everything, the importance of everything you need to say in that one sentence. Don't elaborate. You need to determine what is important, what events speak specifically to that beat. The beat has a very specific type of purpose and function. What happens that speaks to that function? If you're kind of saying a whole lot, then that probably is clear that you might not know what event addresses that beat in your story. You may need to take a step back and think about it and say, well, okay, what really do I need here from all of this that I've written? If you need to write the whole thing out with a whole 12 sentences first, fine. But then, you know, in another pass, go back and reduce it to just the essentials.
Okay. Because like that's sort of the trap I've been falling into. I've been trying to elaborate more because like my beat sheet was very like sparse, so I was trying to like elaborate more on certain events, try to like fill it up, and it was getting. I guess I was getting too convoluted into it. I was making like five different variations of like the beginning. 5 different.
No. Just short and succinct. Yes, Josiah.
So when we work characters like side characters and supporting characters and stuff, do we write actual names for those supporting characters? So let's say we got our script and we're ready to write our script. Would it just be the main character? Because I have a dad and a mom. Should I say that person's dad, or should I give them a name so we can identify with them? Okay.
Give them a name, but you're not married to the name. So if it has to change later, that's fine. And the reason why we say give them a name is just so as your reader reads it in their head, they're getting like, this is Joe and this is Jill. You know, it's almost like putting a name with a face. They're distinct. But if you just have more or less descriptions or like titles, like now dad and mom might work. You know, it depends on the story. Like dad, mom, like person number 2, or I won't name any names, Ade, person X, you know, that doesn't really do a lot for us. So in certain instances like dad, mom, you can get away with that. If it's a character that's like super minor, like the police officer who pulls them over, you don't have to give them a name. Call them cop. All right. Any other questions?
Okay, that works. Also, I sent another version of my beat sheet.
Okay, good. I'll check it out. All right. Hey, man, I'm encouraged. I might not drink anything tonight because some nights I have a hard night and I got to have an adult beverage just to, just to relax. But tonight you guys got me feeling really good, and so I will let you guys go. Don't forget, we'll see you on Thursday, and then you have a quiz on Sunday, and then don't forget about your midterm if you want to start studying for that. And your goals should be diving into your script as soon as possible. And the 3 folks who haven't gotten their results back yet, you will get them back tomorrow. All right? Have a good night, y'all. I will see you. Bye.